IBS isn't a minor problem, it's become a widespread issue nowadays. Bloating, diarrhea, stomach pain, feeling of fullness alternating with constipation. Most people are familiar with these symptoms. Officially, around 15% of Germans are affected. But I say the real number is probably 50%, maybe even more. And why is that? Because we've learned far too often to simply put up with these complaints. But you shouldn't, and you don't have to. And unfortunately, very few people know how to solve the problem, because medications, as many have already noticed, often just make it worse. And that's why you should definitely stay until the end, because today you'll find out what the real and most commonly overlooked trigger for your irritable bowel syndrome is. And I promise you that just a few small changes can have a huge impact. And you can decide for yourself whether you want to put this into practice or if you want to get rid of the problem for good. What does conventional medicine actually mean by the so-called irritable bowel syndrome? Well, it is a functional disorder of the intestine. That means there is no clear, visible, organic cause. But the symptoms are there, they are real, and often they are severe. Many doctors then say that's psychosomatic, or your gut is just sensitive, or you're too sensitive. But that doesn't take the problem seriously or solve it. IBS means digestion gets out of rhythm, and that can have many causes. Intolerances are discussed again and again in this context. Lactose intolerance, fructose, histamine, gluten. In some people, these substances actually cause strong reactions, from stomach pain to diarrhea to inflammation. A so-called leaky gut, an overly permeable gut, also known as leaky gut syndrome, often plays a role as well. Here, the intestinal mucosa is damaged, and substances that should actually stay out enter the bloodstream, and then chaos begins in the body, namely with inflammation, immune responses, and a complete overload of the detox organs. The symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome are varied, and that's exactly what makes the diagnosis so difficult. Typical signs are chronic or recurring bloating, a feeling of fullness or pressure in the abdomen, and bowel movements that are often completely unpredictable. Sometimes in the form of diarrhea, sometimes constipation, and sometimes alternating between the two. Often pain is also added to the mix. Cramps, or even the feeling that your stomach is really all wound up. And many people say, I can't even tell what I'm still allowed to eat. And that's exactly the dilemma. You eat more and more cautiously, but what happens? It still doesn't get any better. Of course, nutrition plays a very big role in this. If you eat way too much sugar, white flour, highly processed foods, or animal products, then you're feeding exactly the bacteria in your gut that actually promote inflammation, and vice versa. The good bacteria that are actually supposed to protect you hardly stand a chance anymore. And then there are also the intolerances, as I mentioned, like lactose, fructose, and histamine. And those often remain undetected. Many people also don't chew nearly enough. That's one of my main points that I always explain, because the better we chew, the easier we make it for our entire digestive tract. But what is it actually like? Most of the time, we just gulp things down, and that overwhelms our small intestine, our gut, every day. And what else is missing? Exercise. Our gut needs movement because it is a muscular organ itself. But you know what? All of that is only half the truth. Because the real destroyer of your gut, the one that works silently, is, and now please really listen carefully, stress. Stress is something completely normal for us, and we don't even notice it anymore because we're used to it. But now it gets really important, because that's exactly the point that almost no one takes seriously. No one notices because it's so normal. Stress is not just a feeling. You must not forget that, and we do get used to it. Stress changes your body, and massively so, especially in your gut. If you are constantly stressed because of your job, family responsibilities, social pressure, or being constantly available, but also because you always want more information and are always looking for new info. Then the following happens inside your gut. The blood flow to your intestinal lining decreases drastically when you're stressed. The tissue becomes thinner as a result. It becomes more vulnerable. The intestinal lining becomes thinner and more vulnerable. The protective layer that normally shields you from bacteria, harmful bacteria, and toxins literally tears open. The so-called tight junctions, that's what these small connections between the cells of your intestinal lining are called. They simply dissolve, and then your intestine just becomes permeable. And that's what many people have today. It's the leaky gut syndrome, which, by the way, was still being laughed at just 5 years ago. But what does it actually mean when we have what's called leaky gut syndrome? That means substances that should never be in your body, like bacterial residues, certain toxins, poisons, or partially digested food, end up directly in your bloodstream. And what does that do in your body? Then your liver really starts to fight hard. Your immune system goes on alert and inflammation develops right in your abdomen. And you feel it as irritable bowel syndrome, as diarrhea, as cramps, as chaos in your digestive system. And that's just one side of it. Because with chronic stress, your body is also constantly producing cortisol. And this hormone not only slows down your digestion, it also blocks your energy supply. Your mitochondria, which are the powerhouses in your cells responsible for your energy production, are in emergency mode. Often, you also don't drink enough because somehow everything is so stressful, and you also notice that drinking too much doesn't do you any good. You grab something to eat on the go and hardly have time for breaks. Your cells are increasingly less well supplied. The spaces between your cells literally dry out, and all of this together makes your gut sick, and it gets a little worse every single day. And what really helps you break out of this cycle? Here are my 5 tips against irritable bowel syndrome. Eat plant-based, high-fiber and fresh foods. Choose natural foods. The more colorful your plate, the happier your gut flora will be. Get rid of sugar, sausage, and white bread. Instead, go for vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and fruit. But be careful. If you notice you can't tolerate this regular diet, then either do a short fasting period or switch to a bland diet. That means pureed vegetables like carrots, mashed potatoes, grated apple, but cooked. So really, the kind of food people have always been given when they were sick in the past, especially with stomach issues. And that's exactly what we still give today. And then the second tip, I already mentioned it briefly earlier. Chew thoroughly. Chew each bite until it's liquid in your mouth. It sounds simple, but it's incredibly effective, and unfortunately, most people don't do it. And that immediately relieves the stomach and small intestine. Then try to incorporate fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh, live foods for your gut bacteria. And fourth, exercise, and do it daily. At least go for a walk. So 150 minutes per week. If you go for a brisk walk, that's already half the battle, especially if you're not really a sports freak. But it would be even better if you also did a bit of endurance training, some strength training, and especially if you stretch. And do that in the evening. Then it's even better. But like I said, walking is already a good start. And do breathing exercises. Move mindfully. Everything that relaxes your belly activates the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. Maybe you've heard of it before. The vagus nerve is the healing nerve. And now, what's the most important thing? Of course, reduce stress. And please make that your priority from now on. Without breaks, there is no healing. Take a deep breath. Take some time offline and learn to say no sometimes. No is a complete sentence, by the way. Suzanne Froelich already said that, and I find it very remarkable because it's true. No should really mean no. Because your gut needs rest. No pill in the world can replace that. And finally, here's my extra tip. If you've tried everything, adjusted your diet, eaten more mindfully, included fermented foods, moved more, and reduced your stress, and you still feel like your gut just isn't getting on track, then there's one more tip I really want to share with you. I already hinted at it briefly earlier, and that is fasting. Often, just 4 days are enough. It's not a radical marathon, but a targeted reset, because that's exactly what it is. A kind of restart for your gut, your digestion, and your immune system. And when you fast, your intestinal lining finally gets the rest it needs to regenerate. The inflammation goes down immediately, blood circulation improves, and your whole body can reorganize itself. And that's the perfect time to continue with a healthy diet, either with easily digestible foods or with the first light, fiber-rich meals. You have to figure that out for yourself so that your gut barrier can rebuild properly, become stable, and you can finally feel good again. But be careful. It's not a one-day cure. Not in a day. The whole process really takes a few months, honestly between 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it actually takes a year to rebuild your gut flora to the way it should be. But what is a year if you live to be 90 or 100 and do so in good health? So I think it's definitely worth it. It's worth it. And besides, when you notice how healthy it is for you and how good it feels to eat healthy, then maybe you'll stick with it. And that's really great, of course. So, and now just a quick summary for you. Irritable bowel syndrome is a signal. It's your body's way of speaking to you. And it's telling you that things can't go on like this. It's your inner healer speaking to you, of course. And you can change something. You don't have to keep suffering, but you need the right tools. And you should finally recognize stress for what it is. The invisible but powerful force behind your digestive disorder. So give your gut what it really needs, because it, I'm sure, will thank you, and more every day. Now you know what you can do about irritable bowel syndrome, but do your friends, your family, your co-workers know that too? That's why you should share this information. And of course, please also share this video.